Hello and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. Just an FYI, this will be the last Outsider Podcast for those who have subscribed to the newsletter for free, which is great, and you are still going to get your once a week piece, but those who are paid are going to get a daily piece and access to the podcast and access to the notes of the podcast, along with detailed availability of the archives. If you're interested in subscribing to have a paid subscription to The Outsider, it's just $5 a month, and there's an ability there for you to do that through a link that's available to you on this particular podcast episode, just down at the bottom of the page. And I also need to mention to you that the Outsider Podcast is brought to you by the Mediocre Movie Club. The Mediocre Movie Club is a group of idiots who review movies in a mediocre, satisfactory manner. You can always find the Mediocre Movie Club at mediocremovie.club. You can find them on Facebook, and you can find them on Instagram, as well as Twitter, and you can also find them on Threads. Be sure to subscribe to their podcast and check out their recent reviews of movies that have been going on for the past month or so. All right. This particular episode, it deals with what's been taking place down at Texas A&M and the issue that I've dubbed an Aggie-sized drama. And this has to do with the professor known as Dr. Joy Alonzo, where she was placed on paid administrative leave because of something critical she said concerning Lieutenant Governor Patrick and her lecture to the University of Texas medical branch this past March. According to the story that was reported in depth from the Texas Tribune, the daughter of former state senator and current Texas Land Commissioner Don Buckingham, who is a first-year medical student, the daughter, not the land commissioner, attended this required lecture and told her mother of the apparent criticisms Dr. Alonzo made toward Lieutenant Governor Patrick, who in turn told Patrick of the criticism, only to reach out to Texas A&M Chancellor and former Controller John Sharp. So here's the little domino effect. This lecture that Joy Alonzo did concerning the opioid crisis is a required one for people to attend at the University of Texas medical branch. And so first-year a medical student who is the daughter of Land Commissioner Don Buckingham heard the criticism, told her mother, told the land commissioner, and the land commissioner, who is as thick as thieves with the lieutenant governor, told him about it. And then the lieutenant governor goes and tells John Sharp, who is the chancellor at Texas A&M and all the A&M system schools. So there was a particular text message that Chancellor Sharp sent to Patrick, and this is quoting the Tribune story, in part, said that Sharp sent a text directly to the lieutenant governor. And this is the direct quote from the text message. Joy Alonzo has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, re firing her. Should be finished by the end of the week. And the text message was signed J. Sharp. So whatever was said apparently was so appalling and appallingly offensive that there was that it was referenced in an email from the University of Texas medical branch course leaders to students that read in part that Alonzo's comments about the lieutenant governor and his role in the opioid crisis did not represent the opinion of the university. And then Alonzo was formally censured in that same email. A few students spoke to the Tribune concerning the content, and pretty much what they said was she was critical on the lieutenant governor's legislative actions or even inactions on the opioid crisis. And that was it. This sort of thing caused this entire domino effect. You might say, okay, well, what's the big deal about all that? Well, here's what we have to really understand. Alonzo's criticisms, prudent or not prudent, should not have caused the irresponsible hysteria that followed. And the fact that the brass of Texas A&M behaved the way it did in cowtailing to the lieutenant governor is a complete affront to the First Amendment to the Constitution. Let's just kind of think back to when Pa Ferguson, this is somebody you've heard of recently here, and Pa Ferguson was the first and really the only governor to be impeached. And he was later convicted of the impeachment due to his indictment over possibly taking money from the state and putting it in his own bank account. So with those charges done, but that there was a hearing and he was impeached on several charges. Let's also know that he was having an issue with the University of Texas, mainly because he didn't win re-election with as many votes as he thought he should have. And by what he thought he should have, he won with less votes than what he won in the first election. So he wins in 1914 with so many votes. He wins again in 1916 with less votes. I grew up to thinking that winning was winning. Whether I get more votes the second time or the first time shouldn't really matter. But it mattered to Pa Ferguson. So here's what he does. He thinks that somebody has to be responsible for this. And he thinks it's those UT professors. And so he actually went after the UT faculty. And there was an investigation done. UT didn't, the brass there didn't do anything, to stand up against Pa. But they found out that it was just what's called academic freedom. And Pa Ferguson, of course, didn't like that. And then there was an interim president put in place that the board that the Board of Regents put in. And Pa didn't like that either. So Pa Ferguson had his issues with higher ed. This is all resemblance of this. You criticize the governor, you criticize the lieutenant governor, and this is the kind of thing that, this is the repercussions that happen. This isn't a different time in a different place in the world. This is the United States of America. And I say, okay, well, why am I going on this little patriotic issue here? Well, let's understand about the First Amendment. The First Amendment guarantees the federal government will not abridge the freedom of speech. Then the 14th Amendment, through its Due Process Clause and Supreme Court rulings using the Due Process Clause, created what's called the incorporation doctrine that makes the Bill of Rights applicable to the states. Because this issue with Joy Alonzo involves key state figures and entities, this puts the freedom of speech front and center. But what's really interesting to me, and it's dripping with delicious irony, is Dan Patrick. We don't have to really rewind all that far back to find something of interest, because we can go back to 2 years, just the previous regular session back in 2021, when he crowed about the First Amendment, when Senate Bill 5 became law. His statement after it was signed into law read in a part: the freedom of speech is a God-given right, and protecting that right is a top priority for Texans. Sounds great until he's criticized in public. Now you may wonder, okay, what was Senate Bill 5 and all that? That had to do with the social media censorship, or at least according to those on the right, that entities like Facebook and then Twitter and Instagram and other things were doing what's called shadow banning conservative thought. And they felt, well, no, we can't do this. We have to make sure everybody has has an ability to speak and is heard in this new a public square. Well, there's been some issues with this. There's been some lawsuits over this. Y'all can find those. But let's be clear. This is Dan Patrick's idea that he thinks the First Amendment's great until he's criticized. Let it also be noted that the fact that the Lieutenant Governor's involvement in all this is absolutely chilling. It appears as if he cares little about the Constitution and more about his feelings. The fact his office even reached out to the administration of Texas A&M and the chancellor not having the back of Alonzo and other faculty sends a telltale sign that it's freedom of speech for me, but not for thee. But let's also know this. The supporters of Patrick and the supporters of Buckingham and all those on the right is truly trivial and is truly confusing to me. There's been this argument here. Now, for those of you who don't live in West Texas, you may not have realized this, but a lot of conservative media in this part of the state has been arguing about the whole much ado about nothing. Like everyone's making a big deal, but it really isn't anything. And these arguments come from the same crowd who just couldn't really make any heads or tails of the fact that the Lubbock Science Spectrum and a particular hotel in this city denied what's called the True Texan Project. And I'd really just define them, and I don't make any bones about it. This is a fascist group. So the Science Spectrum and a hotel in Lubbock denied a meeting of the True Texan Project to inform attendees on the reporting of what's called dirty books in Texas public school libraries and public libraries. Free speech was shouted all throughout the city. You can't do this. This is just so incredibly wrong. How dare you deny them? Well, they end up having their meeting. They went to there was a third place for them. The old saying, third time's a charm. Good for them. They got to have their little meeting. But when it's an elected official whom they support silences a scientist, those same people who were crowing earlier are just shrugging. And why are they shrugging? Because Alonzo wasn't fired. I just have to really just kind of scratch my head here because it's, sometimes reality is just simply stranger than fiction. Now let's also look at the political side of this because we have to. Why would Texas A&M not want to upset the lieutenant governor? Well, if you've been following my posts for some time and you've looked at all this, and you understand that how powerful the lieutenant governor is. The lieutenant governor has an awesome lawmaking influence. He has a hands-on approach to the lawmaking process. Let's also note that A&M sought funding for projects from this very large budget surplus that the legislature had. So they got a couple of things happening here. They're asking for money, and they don't want to make the guy mad who's going to possibly give them this money. We also have to understand that this particular drama is on the heels of Lieutenant Governor Patrick's incredibly big fight in tenure for university professors. He says that this is the way that they can fight this woke agenda that's found in academia from woke professors. Well, there's a couple things to take away from this, but one of the big things to take away is the fact that this is the lieutenant governor's version of cancel culture. The land commissioner informed on what a professor said in a lecture to the Republican lieutenant governor. And despite the A&M leadership standing up to the lieutenant governor, it kneeled to him. and members of the Texas executive branch and an institution of higher learning tried to punish a private citizen. And that's the big takeaway here. The First Amendment is not meant to make us comfortable. And that goes for both sides. Big drama down in Aggie land. This isn't the first one. This is another, there's another instance dealing with a journalism professor who was trying to improve the, really not really improve, but revive the journalism department in Texas A&M. And they hired one of the better ones that came from the New York Times, and they ended up losing out. She ends up losing out because of reactionary measures. But that's the way things go sometimes. I suppose. But lots of drama happening down in Aggie land. All right. Thanks for listening here to the Outsider Podcast. Again, you're free to subscribe to this particular podcast, and I appreciate you listening. Again, just another little edit note here. The podcast from now on, starting on August the 1st, will be for the paid subscribers. So if you like what you're hearing, and I hope that you do, you can start to a paid subscription to the Outsider. It's just $5 a month, and you will get hopefully $20 worth a day of content. I try to give you more than what you paid for. Hopefully you like what you're listening to. Hopefully you like what you're reading. You're free to share. And you're also free to read all the things that I post there. The Outsider Substack newsletter, again, will be once a week for those who have a free subscription. To those who have a paid subscription, you'll get something every day. All right. Thanks for your time. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you again very soon.